Some people enter prison and never come out. High walls, maximum security, iron bars, and watchful guards. A place where freedom is nothing more than a distant dream. But what if someone decided to change that? Think about it. You're locked up with no way out, sentenced to 20, 30 years, maybe even forever. As the days drag on, a thought starts to grow in your mind. What if I escaped? And that's when the game of intelligence begins. Prisoners have plenty of time to think, and some of them think big. They observe everything: the guards' schedules, the cameras' blind spots, every tiny detail of the prison. For months, or even years, they devise plans so bold that they make even the best action movies look like child's play. Some jumped out of windows. Others dug impossible tunnels, tricked guards, were rescued by helicopters, and even used fake heads to make it seem like they were still sleeping while they escaped. And the scariest part? Many of them succeeded. Today, you're going to discover the 4 most unbelievable prison escapes in history, cases that left authorities stunned, and the entire world wondering how on earth they were even possible. If you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's start from number 4 and work our way to the most incredible escape of all. Number 4. The Alcatraz Escape, the fake heads, and the perfect plan. The Alcatraz Escape, the impossible plan that worked? Alcatraz, the place no one was ever supposed to escape from. Located in the middle of San Francisco Bay, this prison was more than just a collection of cells and high walls. It was a symbol of absolute confinement. Surrounded by freezing waters, deadly currents, and sharks, at least that's what the guards like to say, Alcatraz became known as the Rock. The message was clear: if you come in here, you only leave in a coffin. But in 1962, 3 prisoners dared to defy the impossible. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin knew that the only way out wasn't to wait for a miracle. It was to create their own escape plan. And that's exactly what they did. Months of planning. Every detail mattered. Every great escape begins with careful observation. For weeks, they analyzed the guards' routines, identifying patrol schedules, the exact moments of inspections, and even the sounds of the prison at night. Every noise, every step, every sliver of light was a detail that could mean the difference between freedom and death. After thoroughly studying their surroundings, they began to act. Inside their cells, they improvised tools using whatever they could find. Small spoons stolen from the cafeteria, pieces of metal, and even rusty scraps were transformed into instruments to discreetly and silently dig holes behind the ventilation grates. The idea was simple in theory, but incredibly risky in execution. Dig a tunnel small enough to go unnoticed, but large enough for them to crawl through to the other side. And so, night after night, spoonful by spoonful of concrete was removed, and the tunnels began to take shape. But that wasn't enough. They had to make sure the guards never suspected a thing. That's when they came up with their stroke of genius. Fake heads. The trick that fooled everyone. If the guards looked into their cells and saw an empty pillow, their plan would be exposed immediately. So, they created fake heads made of soap, toilet paper, and real hair, which they discreetly stole from the prison's barbershop. The level of detail was so impressive that, under the dim cell lighting, the replicas looked like real, sleeping faces. On the night of the escape, the 3 placed their replicas on their pillows and simply walked out of their cells like ghosts, completely unnoticed. Now, the hardest part was about to begin. The deadly crossing. The ocean was their final obstacle. After crawling through the tunnels to an access point in the prison's service area, the fugitives reached their biggest challenge yet: the treacherous waters of San Francisco Bay. Here, they faced a deadly dilemma. If they weren't fast enough, they'd be caught. If they were careless, they'd drown. But they had already planned for this. Using hand-stitched raincoats, they built an improvised raft reinforced with fabric scraps found in forgotten corners of the cafeteria. And this wasn't just any raft. They had tested the idea beforehand, checking the material's buoyancy inside the prison itself. Every little detail had been thought through. They knew they couldn't simply jump into the water. The tides were a crucial factor. If they left at the wrong time, they'd be dragged away and likely freeze to death before reaching land. So, they carefully calculated the exact moment, using the tide and the moonlight to guide their escape. The mystery that endures to this day: did they make it, The next morning, the guards entered the cells and saw the prisoners sleeping peacefully, or so it seemed. When they took a closer look, they discovered the fake heads and went into a panic. Alcatraz had been defeated. The big question, however, remains unanswered to this day. Did they really escape? The FBI told the press that the three men had most likely drowned. However, no bodies were ever found, nor was there any trace of their improvised raft. Over the years, several mysterious clues have surfaced, leaving open the possibility that they successfully escaped. To begin with, just one day after the escape, a strange phone call was made to a lawyer in San Francisco. The caller claimed to be John Anglin and wanted to negotiate his surrender. When the lawyer refused, the call was abruptly cut off. Was it a prank or a real plea for help? But things get even stranger. For years, the Anglin brothers' mother received anonymous postcards and mysterious flowers on Mother's Day. And at her funeral, two tall women, heavily made up, were seen watching the ceremony. But they vanished before anyone could identify them. Disguises, perhaps? Additionally, witnesses reported seeing the Anglin brothers in Florida and Georgia. And in 1989, two bearded men showed up at their father's funeral, observed the body for a moment, and left without speaking to anyone. Coincidence? Or a silent reunion of fugitives with their past? And now for the most shocking detail. In 2015, a photo surfaced, supposedly taken in Brazil in 1975. It allegedly showed John and Clarence living peacefully. Facial recognition experts analyzed the image and concluded that the resemblance was highly probable. Could the brothers have escaped to Brazil and lived in peace for decades? To top it all off, an anonymous letter from 2013, attributed to John Anglin, claimed that Frank Morris had died in 2005, Clarence in 2011, and that John himself was battling cancer. He had lived in hiding all these years but wanted to surrender in exchange for medical treatment. The FBI analyzed the handwriting and DNA from the letter, but the results were inconclusive. So, the mystery remains. Did they survive or not? Are these clues just false hopes or evidence of one of the most successful escape plans of all time? To this day, this story divides opinions and sparks curiosity around the world. After all, sometimes reality can be even more incredible than fiction. Number 3. The Great Escape from Stalag Luft. 3. Tunnels, disguises, and a race against time. During World War II, one of the darkest periods in history, a group of Allied prisoners decided they would not simply wait for the worst inside Stalag Luft 3, a prisoner of war camp heavily guarded by Nazi soldiers. They were determined to do the impossible, escape the Nazi fortress by digging massive tunnels, in a top-secret operation that seemed straight out of a movie. The idea started to take shape when the prisoners noticed that, despite the intense surveillance, there were weak points in the camp structure. The soil in some areas was softer, and if they worked carefully, they could dig without the guards noticing. But there was a major problem. How to hide the removed soil? How could they ensure the plan wouldn't be discovered before it was completed? That's when the ingenuity of the prisoners came into play. More than 600 men took part in the operation. A true team effort. They created 3 secret tunnels, named Tom, Dick, and Harry, digging them with the most improbable tools. Spoons stolen from the cafeteria, pieces of wood, and anything else that could be used without drawing suspicion. While some men dug, others discreetly disposed of the dirt, hiding handfuls of soil inside their pants and scattering it across the camp during casual walks in the yard. But the escape plan didn't stop there. The prisoners also forged fake documents, improvised Nazi uniforms, and even crafted replicas of civilian clothes to disguise themselves once they got out. Every little detail was carefully planned. They created oil lamps to light the tunnels, built makeshift ventilation systems, and even installed wooden rails to transport the soil more efficiently. After months of relentless digging, Tunnel Harry was finally ready for the escape on the night of March 24th to 25th, 1944. It was the perfect opportunity. 200 prisoners were ready to flee. However, the plan started going wrong from the very beginning. The big mistake that cost many their freedom. As the first prisoners crawled through the tunnel, they quickly realized a major problem. The tunnel exit was not hidden in the forest as planned, but instead opened into an exposed area covered in snow. This meant that each person who left behind visible footprints, something that, sooner or later, would raise suspicion. The escape continued quietly for a few hours until, when the 77th prisoner was about to exit, a Nazi guard noticed unusual movement on the ground and sounded the alarm. Within seconds, chaos erupted throughout the camp. The remaining prisoners desperately tried to flee, but they were captured before they could even reach the exit. Of the 76 men who escaped, only 3 achieved total freedom. The remaining escapees were hunted down over the following days in a relentless manhunt led by the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police. Hitler's orders were clear: capture or eliminate the fugitives. The cruel fate of the captured. When Hitler learned about the escape, he was furious and decided to make an example out of the prisoners to prevent any future attempts. Defying international laws of war, he ordered the summary execution of 50 recaptured prisoners. They were taken in small groups to remote locations, where they were brutally murdered by the Gestapo under the false claim that they had been killed while attempting to escape. It was a cold and calculated massacre that shocked the world when the truth came to light. The remaining 23 recaptured prisoners suffered a slightly less cruel fate, but were still severely punished. They were sent to concentration camps, where many endured torture and inhumane conditions. The only 3 prisoners who truly managed to escape were Per Bergsland and Jens Müller, who successfully fled to Sweden, and Bram van der Stok, who made his way to Spain. They were the only ones who lived to tell the story of how the escape happened and how they managed to survive. The legacy of the Great Escape. Despite the tragic outcome for most of the fugitives, the Stalag Luft 3 escape remains one of the most astonishing stories of resilience and ingenuity during World War II. It showcased the courage of the prisoners, who, despite facing almost impossible odds, were able to create and execute an incredibly sophisticated escape plan. The escape was so legendary that it inspired the classic film The Great Escape, 1963, starring Steve McQueen. Additionally, after the war, many of the Nazi officers responsible for the executions were tried and convicted of war crimes. To this day, Tunnel Harry remains a symbol of determination, teamwork, and courage in times of despair. The Stalag Luft 3 camp has been transformed into a museum, where visitors can see part of the original tunnel and learn about this incredible escape story. Even in the face of a cruel enemy, these men proved that the will to be free is stronger than any fence, any guard, or any wall. Number 2. Pascal Payet, the man who escaped through the skies. If escaping from prison is already something out of a movie, imagine doing it by helicopter, twice. This was the case of Pascal Payet, a French criminal who not only defied the walls of prisons, but made sure his escapes had a cinematic touch. First escape, hijacking a helicopter. The first escape happened in 2001, when Pascal was imprisoned in a maximum security facility in southern France. He was considered a high-risk criminal, convicted for his role in an armored truck heist that resulted in murder. And he knew that if he wanted to be a free man again, he needed a spectacular plan. The plan was brilliant from the very beginning. His accomplices spent months studying the prison, analyzing the guards' routines, patrol schedules, and most importantly, the airspace above the facility. They realized that if they acted quickly enough, they could get Pascal out before anyone could react. Then came the big day. A helicopter was hijacked from an aero club and flown directly to the prison. The pilot, who had no idea his aircraft was about to be used for one of the most audacious crimes in French history, was forced to fly to the facility. Now, imagine the scene. A regular day in prison, guards monitoring the inmates. And suddenly, a helicopter lands in the courtyard. Before the staff could react, Pascal and 2 other prisoners jumped aboard and took off. The guards were paralyzed. How do you stop an escape like that? Chase after them? Impossible. Shoot down the helicopter? The prison didn't have that kind of firepower. Within minutes, Pascal was gone, flying through the sky like the main character of an action movie. However, his time as a fugitive was short-lived, and eventually, he was captured again. But if there was one thing he had proven, it was that prison wasn't a place for him. Second escape, hijacking a helicopter. Once is insane, but twice? In 2007, Pascal was locked up in another maximum security prison, this time under even stricter surveillance. After his spectacular escape 6 years earlier, authorities knew he was a major flight risk and that if he had even the slightest opportunity, he would try to escape again. But guess what? He tried, and he succeeded. This time, an even more elaborate plan. Once again, his accomplices hijacked another helicopter and flew straight to the prison. But this time, The plan was even more daring. The hijackers wore hoods and were armed, making the situation even more intense. When the aircraft landed, Payette jumped aboard once again, and within minutes, he was flying toward freedom. Again, and once again, the guards could do nothing but watch in disbelief. It was unreal, the manhunt, and the end of his freedom. This time, French authorities refused to give him the chance for a third flight. They launched a massive international search, tracking Pascal across Europe. Eventually, he was found and arrested again. Now, his exact location is a tightly kept secret. To prevent yet another spectacular escape, authorities decided never to reveal where he is being held and constantly transfer him between prisons. And what happened to his accomplices? The people who helped Pascal escape weren't so lucky. Many were arrested and convicted for hijacking an aircraft, assisting a prison escape, using a helicopter for criminal activity. Stealing a helicopter once is already complicated, but doing it twice to rescue a high-profile prisoner? That caught the attention of law enforcement agencies worldwide. The impact and the new prison security measures. Pascal Payet's escapes forced France to rethink its prison security. After these incidents, authorities began installing steel nets over prison courtyards to prevent helicopters from landing. Thanks to him, no prisoner can count on an aerial rescue so easily anymore. But despite all these measures, Pascal Payet's story remains one of the most absurd and daring prison escapes in history. While most inmates dream of files hidden inside cakes or underground tunnels, he simply looked up at the sky and thought, why not? Number 1. Ted Bundy, the serial killer who turned escaping into an art. If there was ever a criminal who exploited the system's weaknesses to the fullest, it was Ted Bundy. He wasn't just a cold, calculating murderer. He was also a master of manipulation and deception. And if tricking ordinary people was easy for him, imagine how he managed to fool the police. Not just once, but twice. Bundy was charismatic, persuasive, and, above all, extremely intelligent. He knew that to escape prison, he needed to be creative. And that's exactly what he did. The first escape. The library leap. On June 7, 1977, Ted Bundy was being held at the Pitkin County Courthouse in Colorado, facing charges for his crimes. But unlike most prisoners, he had special privileges that allowed him to move around the courthouse without handcuffs. Why? Because before being recognized as a serial killer, Bundy was a law student and had insisted on representing himself in court. He used this trick to gain the trust of the guards and secure more freedom of movement. And that was the moment. He made his first bold move. While supposedly doing legal research, Bundy was inside the courthouse library, located on the second floor of the building. 2 guards were stationed nearby, but they weren't watching him too closely. After all, who would suspect that this calm, well-mannered man would try anything? Then, without hesitation, he stood up, walked calmly to an open window, and jumped. The drop was almost 7 meters, about 2 stories high. Most people would think twice before making such a risky leap. But Bundy wasn't like most people. He hit the ground hard, twisting his ankle. But he didn't stop, limping but determined. He ran as if his life depended on it. Because, in a way, it did. By the time the guards realized what had happened, Bundy was already gone. For the next 6 days, he wandered through the mountains of Colorado, evading the massive manhunt that was launched to track him down. But being a fugitive wasn't easy. With no food, no shelter, and an injured leg, he struggled to survive. Eventually, he was caught again, driving a stolen car. But that was only his first escape. The best was yet to come. The second escape, the ultimate deception. Bundy knew that staying in prison meant waiting for the inevitable. His conviction was getting closer, and if he didn't act fast, he would lose his last chance. So, for weeks, he studied every detail of his cell in the Garfield County Jail and came up with a plan that seemed impossible. He discovered a weakness that no one had noticed. There was a crawl space above the ceiling of his cell, just big enough for a thin man to squeeze through. And that's exactly what he worked toward. Using a makeshift saw, he began cutting a hole in the ceiling, carefully choosing a spot out of the guard's view. Every piece of debris he removed was hidden among stacks of books and papers, making sure no one noticed. But digging wasn't enough. He needed to test if he could fit. So, over the following weeks, he intentionally lost weight, refusing food to ensure he could squeeze through the opening. December 30th, 1977. The perfect escape. With everything in place, Bundy finally made his move. He waited for the guards to complete their rounds. Then he climbed through the hole and crawled through the ventilation system until he reached the warden's office. Now came the genius part. Inside the warden's office, he found a civilian outfit that had been left for repairs. He changed into the clothes, tidied his hair, and then casually walked through the prison hallways, completely unnoticed. Nobody questioned him. Nobody stopped him. By the time the guards realized his cell was empty, Bundy was already gone, driving a stolen car heading straight for Florida. The perfect escape and the crimes in Florida. This time, Bundy didn't waste time hiding in the woods like he had during his first escape. He knew he needed to be quick and smart. He stole money, used fake identities, and traveled across the country without drawing suspicion. A few weeks later, already in Florida, he rented an apartment under a false name and began living as if nothing had happened. But Bundy wasn't just an ordinary fugitive. He was a psychopath. Instead of laying low, he went back to killing. A new wave of horror. While still on the run, Bundy broke into a university sorority house, Chi Omega, and attacked 4 women, brutally murdering 2 of them. Just days later, he kidnapped and murdered a 12-year-old girl, committing one of his most horrifying crimes. By this point, police were desperate to catch him, and that's exactly what happened on February 15th, 1978. The end of the road, Bundy was stopped by a Florida police officer for a routine traffic stop. The officer noticed his suspicious behavior, asked for identification, and, realizing something was off, tried to detain him. Bundy attempted to run, but was quickly caught and arrested. At that point, he had nowhere left to go. No more escapes. After being convicted for his crimes in Florida, Ted Bundy was sentenced to the electric chair. This time, there were no more holes in the ceiling or open windows to jump from. On January 24th, 1989, he was executed at Florida State Prison, finally ending the reign of terror of one of the most notorious and manipulative serial killers in history. A criminal mastermind of escape, but his escapes remain among the most incredible and daring ever recorded. While most prisoners spend years planning escapes that never happen, Bundy simply jumped out of a window and outsmarted an entire prison system, and for a time, he almost got away with it forever. If this story were a movie, many people would probably say it was too far-fetched. But the truth is, Ted Bundy turned crime and escaping into a true art. What do you think? That brings us to the end of this wild journey filled with twists, daring plans, and escapes that seem straight out of a Hollywood script. But now I want to hear from you. Which of these escapes impressed you the most? Do you think the Alcatraz fugitives actually survived? Could Ted Bundy have escaped again if he hadn't been caught in Florida? Let me know in the comments. And if you love mysteries, crime stories, and unbelievable escapes like these, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. Thanks for sticking with me until the end, and I'll see you in the next one, because the world is full of incredible stories waiting to be told.